All right. Hey, folks, happy Friday. Right now, you just have me, which is not what anyone signed up for. But Trond is getting a few audio things worked out on his side. So he'll be joining shortly. As always, we have chat on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So feel free to drop any comments in there. Let us know where you're joining from. Let us know if you have any fun weekend plans. We usually kick off with just kind of like checking in on how our week is going. So we'll definitely get an update from Tron. I will say it has been extremely warm on the East Coast. I think pretty universally. I'm in North Carolina, but we've had a couple of consecutive days of 75 and sunny, which I'm enjoying a lot. And um, I'm going to be running a race this weekend, so that's a little hot. So hopefully in the morning, it's not quite that warm um, on Sunday, but it should be fun either way. Looks like we've got Timon joining. Um, Thanks for stopping by. Anyone else? Feel free to drop in the comments, and I'll check in on Trond and see if he's um, getting everything set up. Terms of announcements on Goliath's side for this week, we did release, or I should say, Sam, our firmware lead, cut the release for our V 0.11 firmware SDK. So that was a great update. One of the things that I thought was really neat that came in on this release was Mike, another one of our firmware folks who's usually on this stream with me, had a fix in upstream Zephyr. I think we might have mentioned that the week that it went in, but it's in Zephyr 3.6. And basically, the error code wasn't propagating when I don't know if it was in all cases, but especially in the case where there was a too many requests error. So basically, if you're getting rate limited on our server because your device is going crazy, and so we were unable to access that error in the firmware SDK. And so propagating that up from Zephyr is now allowing us to check when we do encounter too many requests. And obviously, we want to do some sort of back off there. One of the interesting things is something you might do in that case when you hit too many requests is log a message. Well, if you have the Goliath logging backend configured, then that is sending another request, right? Up to the cloud, which of course is going to be rate limited as well. So that can get you into a tight loop. So it was really cool to see that fix go into upstream Zephyr and then flow back down into our SDK when we bumped our Zephyr version. So super cool to see that. We can certainly have Mike or Sam go into more detail on that and some other information about what went into the 0.11 release. But that was super cool. It looks like Trond has rejoined. We are going to optimistically pull him into the stream and guess that his audio is working. Trond, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. And your audio sounds great. So I think we're all good to go here. I likely should have sent you the StreamYard link earlier than 12 minutes before we started so that you'd have more prep time. But I appreciate you rolling with the punches.
No worries. I think we can blame Ubuntu for this one.
Cool.
So.
Cool. Yeah. I will say that Tron and I think you are now the only other person in the company, because no one had them when I joined, with a System 76 machine. And I know it sounds like you've been a big fan thus far. I've been a big fan of System 76 for a while. And one of the joys of joining a startup is sometimes there is more flexibility around what machines you can use. So we're both benefiting from that policy, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a Linux first machine and Linux only in this case, I think is great, and hardware is really solid as well. So yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we were both talking about it's good that we have dedicated microphones as well, because along with that great hardware, they have some pretty beefy fans in these machines, so they can really spin up and cause a lot of noise. But we're both working from home, so that's typically not too much of an issue. But anyway, I was just honestly stalling until you got here, but talking about some of the updates in the new firmware SDK release. But generally, we kind of start off these streams with just talking about how we're doing, how things are going. This is a unique case because you just joined Golioth. So there's both how you're doing and also how your onboarding has been. But do you just want to kind of like kick us off by talking about your background, who you are, where you live, that kind of thing, and let folks know a little bit about you?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Trond, and I live in Trondheim in Norway, ironically. I've been working at Nordic Semiconductor, who's headquartered here in Trondheim, for nearly a decade. So I wrote my master thesis with Nordic, and then joined on their Bluetooth Mesh project, which was sort of starting back in 2015, I guess. So yeah, I stayed with them for nearly a decade, and I saw like my 10-year anniversary coming up, and I decided perhaps it's time I at this point I'm either staying with Nordic throughout my career, or I'll look around a bit. And I'd been talking to Jonathan every now and then through the Zephyr project, and he gave a very good impression. I've had a good impression of Golioth for a long time. The sort of the visibility and the type of content that's being put out there by Golioth, and the not just marketing but DevRel and the SDK team as well, has just been fantastic. Really, seeing it from the outside, and especially from a vendor role like Nordic, where we often saw customers having this problem with having a bunch of knowledge about how to make hardware, and then at the end of the project they realize, oh, we got to connect this IoT thing to the internet, otherwise it's just internet of nothing, I guess. So seeing that problem being solved in such a great manner gave me a good impression of Golioth from the beginning. And yeah, so I reached out, and turned out we could make something work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that you're gonna have to write a blog post entitled "Internet of Nothing," talking about some of those challenges. That sounds like a pretty good tagline there. I'm sure Chris or Mike is listening to this and just assigned you an issue for that. But well, that's super cool to hear, and I think your background is super interesting. Like you said, coming from a silicon vendor, and experiencing some of these problems firsthand. You also have like an interesting background in firmware, but you joined Golioth too, and I say it nominally because we all kind of work on everything because we're a very small team. But you joined to primarily drive some more front end efforts, and make a lot of improvements in the console. And I think you've had some background in obviously front end technologies with your VS Code work, which you might talk about a little bit. But also, I think it's really neat. And honestly, when we were interviewing you and that sort of thing, we were identifying that like there's very few folks with experience in front end technologies and have worked on a firmware Bluetooth stack, right? Like you are kind of a unique prototype in that case. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got into sort of like that VS Code space, and how that might relate to some of your firmware work, or how your firmware work informs some of the things you do, and more the UX experience now?
Yeah, yeah. So I got into, as you said, I got into VS Code really, and making extensions for VS Code, and that was sort of the gateway drug for me to get out of the embedded device world. I still enjoy the embedded stuff, and I can see myself going back to it eventually. But for now, I want to see what the world's like outside of C land, I guess, and seeing what sort of problems are being solved in different parts. But originally, I've been sort of tinkering with my config files for my editor for forever. I guess I was a Vim user for years, and my vimrc file eventually got so big that Vim was no longer Vim. It was just some sort of playground for all my half-baked self-made extensions there. So I changed to VS Code at some point and just kept using that while working on the Bluetooth Mesh SDK in Nordic. And then Nordic transitioned to using Zephyr as a base for the SDK. And Zephyr's got a lot of config languages and sort of stuff around
Very
it.
true.
Yeah, but you just it's got a learning curve to it. I think everyone complains about device tree in particular when starting out with Zephyr. And my way of dealing with that was to sort of make some extensions for VS Code to help myself understand the language. I think there's no the best way to get a good grip on a new language is to write a parser for it that makes sure that you'll have the deep knowledge sooner than you really need to. So I did that, and then eventually that sort of got picked up by Nordic management, and they saw that all the existing users struggle with the same thing. So I posted some of these, like this one, the VS Code device tree extension to the marketplace, and similar one for kconfig, I think. And users started using them. Nordic was sort of running into some maintenance issues with the current IDE solution. So we were, along with some colleagues, I urged them to try and do VS Code based editing instead. So we managed to convince them, and I sort of got caught up in that. And while I did some part-time work working on Bluetooth Mesh and then working on this new VS Code project, I eventually transitioned all the way over to VS Code. So that way I became a front-end developer sort of by accident, I guess, where VS Code is all web tech. It's TypeScript, and in our case, it's React as well for the Nordic extensions. And I found it interesting. I think the development in general, like software development, isn't as different as we think it is in other disciplines. I think good code is good code, and it's about identifying the right model for your data and finding good patterns. And good patterns and good models are the same in all disciplines, I think. It's just the way they're sort of presented to the user at the end that's different.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight, and something that at least I hope we embrace at Goliath. It's one of the reasons I joined Goliath, is because of that opportunity to kind of work up and down the stack, all the way from like, designing PCBs to, writing front end code and that sort of thing. And the nice thing is, like, we get opportunities to do that every day, which I totally agree that the concepts translate really well. So like experience you get in one domain certainly helps in others, but also it's really nice to be able to exercise each of those domains. I think every once in a while, like on a weekend or something like that, I'll just do something in the firmware SDK just to make sure I'm keeping those skills sharp, and also getting an understanding of, what the world is like on the firmware side. And that gives me better insight into, how we want to design APIs on the cloud side, or design a user experience in the console and that sort of thing. So I think not only are those skills very complementary, but they're also kind of necessary to, at least in the domain that we're in, where we're spanning kind of like the full stack, if you will, which I think is really cool. So you've been going through, this is the end of your second week, I think, unless if time is a funny thing at a startup. But you've certainly onboarded very quickly. I think at Goliath, maybe just to give some folks context, and we have kind of, I think, like two goals for this stream. One, like introduce you and talk about onboarding, and then two, talk about some of the work that you've already done. But giving folks maybe like a little bit of insight into onboarding at Goliath. So I think we have 12 people on the team. I don't know. I'd have to go look in Slack. But we have, let's see, we have 6, I guess, engineers. And so we try to keep onboarding like fairly light, right? Because we really shouldn't have a massive, cumbersome process. And a lot of times we're expecting folks to jump in and get going really quickly. So if we have to, explain the whole lay of the universe to them before they start doing work, that's kind of a failure for both of us. And so I think, particularly in your case, primary goal is like getting into the front end code base, and understanding how that works and being able to move quickly there. But we've also done some other things to get you integrated, and I think some of our ongoing processes actually make onboarding a little smoother. And I'm interested to get your feedback on that. Which please feel free to offer critical feedback on this live stream. That's totally good, and we like that public retrospective. But I think our design process is probably useful for getting a sense of, our architecture and motivations for why systems are the way that they are. Probably our propensity to put things into GitHub issues that are searchable is probably useful, in our use of Notion as well. But I'm curious, how has onboarding been for you? What have been some good parts? What have been maybe some not so good parts, and things we can improve for the next person who comes through?
I think I'll actually struggle to find things that didn't work. I think it all worked quite well. So yeah, I think like you said, there are processes ongoing. Sort of the company, and I think the structure, the infrastructure here is growing. And I think you've before I joined, you've been transforming some of the sort of infrastructure and process parts here, with the GitHub issues being one of the new things. So I think seeing long-term goals pretty early on and being exposed to them. In Golioth, we run this sort of project board with quarterly goals, and then we try to get everything into epics that eventually sort of go towards those goals. I think seeing that big picture in a sort of async manner, I don't have to sit in a meeting and see a presentation by someone that where they'll explain what I need to do for the next 3 months, but I can go and explore and see what we collectively want to achieve, and then try and form my my own tasks and focus based on that. And I think that helped more than I expected to, really. So, like you say, we're a small team here, so it's important that everyone has some idea where we're going, so that we're all pulling in the same direction. And also being all remote as well, I think having the agency to do that is important. So seeing that framework and seeing like collectively this is where we're going, seeing pull requests going in this direction, pointing towards some key objectives on the long term. That yeah, I'm not heavy on the processes, but that sure is some process stuff that really helped.
Awesome. Well, that's really great to hear. The like epics and OKRs you were mentioning there. This is actually the first quarter we've done that, and some might argue that we're like pushing the GitHub organizational features to their limits, but kind of like digging in further with some specifics in that process. Basically like anytime we're doing any work, we would like to be able to say, this is the issue that represents the work that I'm doing, and that issue should have a tracked by label that GitHub adds. So issues, we like specific work items, we want to live close to the code, right? And you open your PR and you fix that issue. Epics live at a higher level that may span code bases, so we have a dedicated repo for that. So at any given point, you should be able to say, I'm working on this ticket, and we should be able to go from that ticket to the epic, from that epic to the product launch that's associated with it. And that's where we like start to bring in dates where we're trying to like hit things. And then from that product launch to the OKR or the KR that's associated with an objective there. And it's cool because I think from an engineering perspective, we frequently go that direction after we do like a quarterly planning at the beginning, right? We go from like bottom up. But I've talked to other folks in our organization, like Brian, who leads all of our business stuff, which is just like everything. And he's mentioned kind of going top down, right? Because he doesn't really, it's immaterial to him, right? What we're doing on a daily basis. But on a quarterly basis, or even maybe on a sub quarterly basis, it's pretty important because he needs to communicate to customers, this is what's coming. Maybe he's not giving exact dates, but he's saying, like in this time frame, we might be able to work on it. So he's mentioned being able to go to like the OKRs view and being able to see like, oh, okay, I can see progress towards this objective that we're seeing here, or going to the product launches and saying, oh, I see this date is currently set here. And I can also see like a gauge that's telling how close we are to that. So maybe I want to check in if that gauge is not as full as I think it should be, and make sure that that data is accurate. So I think it's been useful in both those respects. And another thing that you touched on there, which I doing some self-reflection, I think that we certainly like pushed very hard. I'm interested to hear if it was too much for you coming in, but I know Dylan and I really emphasize that like we want you to take ownership, and that's part because like we think you're very capable. We say that for everyone, right? We think all the engineers at Goliath are very capable. But also we just like we need it, right? We're a small team, and folks have to take ownership. Folks have to be able to define their tasks. They have to be able to see a high level goal and break it down, or else we're not going to be able to meet our kind of like large ambitions that we have. So it's encouraging to me for that you were able to look at some of the higher level goals and be able to generate some of your work items, which I think speaks, to your skill set and abilities for sure. But I was curious, did you feel like the ownership aspect of things was overemphasized just right? Or, you probably would have come in and taken a lot of ownership no matter what. But I'm curious to hear how that was for you.
No, I think it was just right. I did have an sort of an ownership role in my previous project at Nordic. So coming in, I feel like I'm actually I'm more of an individual contributor here now, even though I do sort of own the front end already. So no, I think it was just right, and having that just for your day-to-day work as well, being able to determine which problems to fix. I think it's a different type of mentality from the give me a ticket and I'll resolve it and then I'll take the next one. And I think it's the only mentality that works in a small team and in a small company, especially because we're here to try and build something. We're not here to try and just get through a sprint or close tickets or do our work items meet our performance goals. We're here to build this this product, and it doesn't work if we just sit and sort of wait for someone to feed us stuff to do. So yeah, it was like I couldn't know exactly how this worked in Goliath before joining, but it was part of my motivation for joining a company that's this size, really, having that agency and being able to identify issues and then work on them, or identify features and then sort of propose them and demo them and spearhead them. I think it's the most exciting part about software development to me, at least at this point in my career. And having the opportunity to do this in a company like this is a lot of fun. Where it's sort of the success of the company depends on us all taking part in it and trying to sort of work towards this common goal of making Goliath succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like you mentioned that you're more of kind of an individual contributor here. And I think that, in certain ways we're all kind of like both, right? We're individual contributors and kind of tech leads in our domain. I think, specifically in my position, for example, right before we jumped on this, we had a pretty long thread going on one of your PRs about like where we should like handle this specific interface, right? And whether we should have multiple with like different scope. I'm being intentionally vague because we haven't launched this yet. But one of the things that I like to do there is like you're taking ownership of the front end. So for most things, right? Like I'd like to say like you are a tech lead here and I am providing feedback for you to make a decision. Now in some things, right, like we do have more like, this fits into a higher level goal. And so I'll be more specific maybe about like, and we need to do it this way because this is part of this bigger picture. And usually like discussion leads to just general alignment on that. So it's like joint decision making. But in general, if it's like, something where it's like fairly subjective and that sort of thing, if we give more ownership and latitude to the person who is primarily working in that area, then they're going to be more efficient and effective and probably happier too as well, right? And we hire and pay people for a reason, because they have good insights and good thoughts and good skill sets. So I hope that's something that, it obviously gets different as we grow as an organization and get larger. But I hope it's quite a long time before we have a real top down feel. Maybe never, hopefully never actually, but a real top down feel to the way that we do technical decision making.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is possible to scale quite well without too much top down. Actually, it's one of the things that I think Nordic does well. So I'm sort of coming from an organization where that was the norm. It was engineer driven. Sometimes that can lead to engineers sort of just running amok and doing whatever they want to be doing.
Right.
But I've seen Nordic grow from like 200 people to 1,500 people and still keep that engineering driven decisions, sort of pushing the company forwards. So I think it's possible, but it has challenges as well. Where especially with growth, I think the being able to grow and not just become sort of 100 different individual departments with their own agendas. That's the real trick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to pull up you deployed something to production this week that I know a lot of us were very excited about, and some of our customers have been asking about. I was curious if you'd be willing to kind of pull up the console and talk about the change that you made. And the change kind of manifests in a potentially like subtle way, but there was actually kind of more fundamental reworking of the underlying system about how we manage context and that sort of thing throughout the single page application console. So if you want to talk about a little bit about some of the changes that enabled us to do what the end user is seeing, I think that'd be great as well.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Let's see if I can share my.
It looks like Timon also mentioned your embedded FM episode. I also listened to that when we started interviewing you, which is a great episode. Would definitely encourage folks to check that out. I think Trond gives some deeper insights into some of the things we just talked about here, but also great podcasts in general. So shout out to those folks.
For sure. Yeah. I think I was still at Nordic at that point, so it's only about Nordic, really.
But be concerning if it was about Golioth already.
Yeah, that'd be very yeah, that'd be odd. Yeah, so we can look at sort of, I guess, what I did in my first week at Golioth. Could be the title of this. So the console in general is organized by projects under organizations, and up until this point, we've had the projects sort of just running as a top level thing in the site hierarchy. So what we've done now is we've tried to organize this in a more future-proof manner, where organizations are now the top level thing. So my organization is just named Trond, and I've got the Turtle Racer project. Never mind the arbitrary naming here. But everything that happens now is organized according to the structure of my organization and then my project. And we want to be expanding on this over time as well, so that organizations can sit here and be the top level item, not just in the hierarchy of the page, but also structurally in the UI, and eventually for the data model as well, where I think that's where we still have a way to go, where some of the data is still not organization centric, but we're moving in the right direction, I think. So
yeah. Mention some of the so the previous structure, the page we're looking at right now, what would the URL have been before the changes that you put in?
So previously, I think everything was scoped basically without the prefix for your context. And that means that devices were under device and then just their hash. And as a consequence, you couldn't really share any links to a device or to a project or to a blueprint, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was based on sort of internal state that you would track and change through this switcher up here.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've organized everything by the hierarchy that the data sits in, and as a result, all the sort of resources there are uniquely identifiable by their URL. And I think that it's a necessary step for this. It's also the most familiar way, I think, for most users in tools in general to handle their projects and their organizations in this manner. So it's a sensible step forwards, but the code base is built up without this concept in mind. I think that was where I spent most of my time, actually. I think I had a prototype of this running within the first day or so, and then the real work started to make sure the data structures internally actually reflected this, and that the sort of the nitty-gritty stuff in the front end actually modeled the data in the same way that the UI is doing right now.
Nice. Yeah. So before we were, we had this project in org context, right? Just like in local storage. And we still have that in some cases, but devices are interesting because a device ID is actually globally unique on Goliath. So in theory, we could have kind of handled this case perhaps, but all the other pages, right, are using things that are scoped. So if you look at a blueprint or something like that, I believe, well, we don't have any here, but or a tag or something like that, there might not have been a globally unique URL, or we're just like looking at tags here. So I think, for example, we actually had a coworker who opened an issue that was like, basically, whenever I go to the console, I'm getting default dropped into a project. We previously just would like select the first project if we didn't already know what project you were looking at. And they were like, I always get dropped into the first project, and it's not the one that I'm ever wanting to look at. It's like some test one that I created at some point that I'm keeping around. And one of the nice things about this is, I just told them right after you launch this, well, just create a bookmark to the org you want to go to and just go straight there, like exactly like we do with like GitHub or something like that. One of the important things that you did here, though, is, or let's actually say first, one of the drawbacks of this approach is that if we have documentation that's meant for the general public, then we don't know what org and project to link you to, right? And so previously, one of the advantages of the scheme is that we could say, go to, console.goliath.dev/tags, and it would just take you to a tags page. And maybe if you were getting started, you only had one project anyway, so it always took you to where you wanted to go. And if it didn't, you could say, oh, I'm on the tags page, but I'm in the wrong org or project. I just need to switch to the one that I want. One of the things you did is preserve that behavior. And so, for example, I think if you deleted Trond and Turtle Racer from there and just went to tags, it would actually drop you onto the same page and rewrite the URL for it.
Not
or
this one,
not for tags. We're doing some live debugging. Devices, perfect. Yeah.
Devices.
So it's gonna do that defaulting for you. And I think we also talked about a little preview for folks is if we don't already have the organ project, right, giving you a selector to say like, hey, you're trying to go to tags, but where do you want to see them, to make it a little bit easier. So anyway, I thought that was a great improvement that preserved that ability from the previous system while also adding the new functionality in the new system.
Yep. Yeah. And it is important. Like every time you do a restructure like this, you're breaking not just your own documentation links, but every forum post, every tutorial, everything that anyone ever made that references your web page is going to break. So being able to preserve that helps a bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you can do it without any like drawbacks to the new system, that's always a big benefit. I think, in general with any early stage product, hopefully internally and externally, right? Like our customers want us to be making improvements all the time, right? Our Goliath in a year hopefully is 50 times better than Goliath today, and hopefully we can say that every year. But with making a lot of advancements, you have to weigh how is this going to impact existing users? And sometimes there are changes that may break a link, and we do some sensible defaulting to help you at least still have a decent experience, which is a nice thing that we do here, which I think is really beneficial. But we're always kind of like doing that calculus of like, is this going to disrupt the experience or is this going to enhance the experience? And how much backwards compatibility do we need? In general, we like full backwards compatibility always, but sometimes we work around that to make sure that we're delivering that velocity that we promise, but also not disrupting flows for customers.
True. Yeah.
I know there's some other things that I think you're going to demo at All Hands today, which we have every Friday, which is really exciting. But in general, with the console, I was curious, in the spirit of that ownership and that sort of thing, is there anything that you've kind of thought about coming through? I know we've talked about some, addressing some technical debt and some like testing framework stuff and that sort of thing. But as far as user facing capabilities, is there anything as a user of the console that you're excited to maybe improve or iterate on? Anything that's top of mind in that regard?
We do have some things coming up in the pipeline that I'm not sure if I'm should be talking about just yet, but I'm excited about that. I think we are looking to enhance. I think what you're saying is true here. Goliath in the year is going to be a massively improved product if we can pull this off. So I'm excited about that, but it doesn't make for good stream content. I think just being secretive.
maybe not yet. Maybe not yet.
Yeah, not quite. So I hope so. I think there's some parts there where what we're doing with stuff like this, sort of hitting conventions on the structure of the URLs, the structure of the page in general, and aligning it with what we want Goliath to be in a year. It feels like this sort of thing where Goliath is going from feeling a bit like a startup. Like the product is good, but there are some things that are a bit different or a bit unexpected, and sort of pulling it into that state where it feels like, yeah, this is exactly where it is, and I know instinctively where to find whatever I need to look for in the console. I think that's always a good goal for a front-end project, is that if the user just knows where the thing they're looking for is before you've even showed it to them, you've made a good console. So I am excited about trying to pull some of that off. I think we're nearly there, but there's always stuff that can be improved.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm certainly excited for some of those things that we already have in the backlog and plan to improve upon, as well as other ones that I'm sure that in your experience working in the console are going to naturally come out and you're going to suggest and drive some of our planning there. So lots of excitement on things coming up. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you want to share about, getting started at Goliath, your first 2 weeks working on the console? Or anything like that?
Well, we could talk a little bit about, I think, the remote work and remote first situation. That's new to me, and I think as well. I was talking to my girlfriend about this just yesterday. That this works better than I expected in some ways. I didn't expect it to not work, but having an organization that's set up for a remote only setup, it's a different feel. It has some different requirements to the process, like we've talked about initially. Being able to sort of track and work towards common goals on your own, and making those decisions asynchronously. I think that's important, and it's worked better than sort of my worst fears, for sure. Like I think having the different time zones here and working remotely from Europe with a mostly US-based company as well. It actually works well when it's structured this way and when the processes are set up this way.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I think you probably have you to like Jonathan and Ariana is probably the biggest gap, I think, in time zones. I think, one of the things that's useful is we some of us keep some odd hours, which might make it a little bit smoother. I know that I might be more aligned on your hours than I am on like Western United States hours, which is interesting. I think the number one thing that I've actually only worked in fully remote companies in my career. Well, for most of my career, the majority of my career. And one of the things that I feel like is really key is one, acknowledging that there is going to be situations where someone's going to miss something because of the time zone difference, right? So let's not pretend like we're all going to be online 24/7, and there shouldn't be an expectation that folks are going to attend outside of whatever their working hours are, which sometimes is actually not correlated to their time zone, right? Some folks are like, I want to work through the night, and one of the beauties of having a round the clock organization is that can be accommodated as well. Maybe their life circumstances dictate that rather than their time zone. That I think is really important. So setting expectations correctly, uh, ensuring that we do have some time that's overlapping, ensuring that we identify the critical folks who need to have time overlapping. And then the biggest one to me is that if we have recurring meetings, those are the ones that need to be accommodating, especially accommodating of folks' time zones. Things that are more ad hoc, right? We're going to roll with the punches. We're going to record things. We're going to document things. But something that where we're saying this is a habitual thing we're going to do, and this is part of our culture here. Those are the ones where we need to make sure that they're accommodating for folks. So I know in this case, we moved our cloud office hours from Monday afternoon to Tuesday morning, which was not disruptive at all for Tim and I. Tim's another engineer on our cloud team, and was much more accommodating to your time zone. So it was kind of a no brainer situation. Um, and I think, all hands is right on the edge of your time zone. So we can talk about that some more as well. But that's kind of like the big thing to me. It's, culture building things need to be accommodating of everyone there, or else your culture is not going to be representative of everyone in the company. So anyway, I'm glad to hear it's been going well for you. I've personally enjoyed having you on the team because I wake up very early in the morning, and it's nice to have someone else around. So that's certainly been good.
Yeah, I think I wanted to mention the demo setup that we have going as well.
Yeah.
We record demos and just sort of upload them to this internal streaming service, and this as well works great for asynchronous sharing essentially. And it's the equivalent of, hey, come take a look at what I made, and do you guys have any feedback? But it's not synchronous. It's something you can post, and then you'll get that feedback perhaps immediately, perhaps an hour later when the other guys wake up. But having that sort of built into the culture makes a big difference as well. And I think in some ways it's actually superior to having the synchronous, let's have a meeting where we go through this feature, because that sort of disrupts everyone's work essentially.
Yeah, it's also less considerate of future people as well who couldn't have been there no matter what, right? Because they weren't part of the company. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot as you've joined, and we kind of talked about that a little bit with maybe some of our process decisions as an engineering organization that have been beneficial in onboarding. If you record things, right, or you write them down, perhaps as a downstream effect of having a remote first culture in different time zones, then future Tron, future Dan, future whoever joins Goliath is going to benefit from that as well. And one of the things I've noticed, and I'm kind of curious if this is maybe part of your background and maybe doing some open source work and that sort of thing, your commit messages have been super helpful. And that's something that I'm fairly passionate about as well. You'll see a lot of my commit messages are lengthy, you might say. And I'm curious, if some of that context building. I think open source is a great proving ground for that, because not only do you have different time zones, but you have totally different organizations. You don't have a shared wiki that you're all going off of, and you didn't have, an all hands meeting where you all got aligned. It's just individuals who need to be able to communicate more full context. I'm curious if maybe some open source experience has informed the way you write commit messages, and maybe issues as well as another place I've already noticed it with your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all Zephyr for me. So I think
Yeah.
before I started working on Zephyr, I think all my commit messages were in the form of fix the typo, added
Yeah.
this, and then just squash them at the end. And yeah, having I think a good commit is almost has a longer commit message than it has actual changes in some ways, because you want to sort of make a snapshot, not just for the reviewer but for yourself as well, justifying why you've done what you've done, discussing anything that's any choices you made, anything you considered and then chose not to do as well, which I think is just as important when looking back at the log. So you want your Git log to breed sort of a record of the not just the changes but the decisions and the justification, so that you can see sort of your project evolving and revisiting old ideas if the circumstances have changed. You can see your notes, and having that sort of parallel note to self system as part of the commit messages, that makes a big difference. And yeah, I think this is the way. Like, Zephyr is a Linux project, and they've inherited their way of working with commits from Linux. So and to me, it seems like it's the right way to go about it, and especially in open source or remote only companies, the you need that justification. If you can't sit there and pair program it, you need to record this, and as a benefit, you'll actually remember why you did what you did, and your commit log won't just be a sort of long list of short messages or keyboard smash, essentially.
Right.
So you'll see your project evolving as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you mentioned kind of like Zephyr being in the Linux Foundation. I think a lot of the place that I kind of learned some of those similar patterns was working on Kubernetes and some adjacent projects in the CNCF, which is also under the Linux Foundation. So maybe that they're propagating good practices there. I think one of the first Slack conversations you and I might have had in the Goliath Slack was about merge strategy, which of course you could have long debates about this well into the night, with people on the internet. But I think, I don't want to infer too much about your preferred strategy, but I think both of us kind of like lean towards something like rebase and merge, or perhaps merge commit, where you preserve that history, because there's kind of like some trade-offs. So I think some folks prefer the squash and merge because you are less concerned about when you're like going through and addressing review. You can just like add things and then collapse it all down, which I could understand that a little bit. I think with the rebase and merge commit, though, it really empowers the commit author to be able to reflect those decisions and motivation, which they have the most context on, which is why I'm definitely a big fan of it. Obviously, you can rewrite the full commit message and squash and merge. So lots of nuance here. I'm trying not to, get attacked online later, but but I really like that rebase and merge because you can make the decisions about, this is why I did this thing. Sometimes actually, typically in a single PR, if you do something and then change it, you are going to want to squash that down, right? In some form or fashion. There have been times though where I've actually done like implemented something and then done a partial change to it, and I actually want to represent that even in a single PR, which is, you could argue is somewhat wasteful, but like I want to show like, oh no, this is actually the other option, right? And this is a slight change that I made to it, which, could have been something that we decided down the line, but we happened to do it in the single PR. And I like that we have the optionality to reflect that context in a change set. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I think that too goes into sort of recording your intent and your thought process throughout, which it's just helpful. I think
Yeah.
I think last year GitHub introduced this a better UX around force pushes as well, which I think was the big argument. Like if you have to force push to your branch, it's going to disrupt the review, and you can't really see what changed between one round of reviews and the next one. And as far as I can remember, they've sort of fixed that now with some app level intelligence on top there, where you can do a force push, preserve your commit history, and still have a decent view of what changed between each round of review.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times I'll do, until the approving reviews are in, I'll do strictly additive, and then I'll do like an interactive rebase and like squash down maybe like 3 sets of changes into one, and then rewrite the commit message there. So maybe it does lean towards folks who are a little more experienced with Git. But at least internally, I think, if anyone is less experienced with that, we certainly have resources to help them get up to speed. So I think
Yep.
that reflects our opinions internally.
Yeah, I think so. I think with Git as well, it's the difficult part about Git is that you can always sort of bail out. You
Yeah,
don't have to learn anything. You can just sort of squash everything if you know how to just get back to where you were. You can choose to do that, and every time you do, you don't learn how to resolve it properly. So
right, right.
there's almost no situation you can't actually get yourself out of, or revert or get back to the old version. But you can always choose to just ignore that and move on and get stuff done, and then you'll have the same problem next time as well. So
Yeah, right.
in a way, it would be easier to learn Git if it wasn't so forgiving with this stuff.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I have a kind of like uniform process that I do in almost every case now of creating a new branch for my current one and maybe pushing it to a remote and saying like, this is, I'll name it like, whatever branch dash snapshot or something, and maybe like a timestamp on it, and then push that up and be like, all right, I have a backup somewhere. And now I'm going to do my interactive rebase, or actually a lot of times my rebase strategy is squash all commits, and then reset head one commit back. So everything is now a staged or an unstaged change, and then go back through and commit files at a time and that sort of thing. Rewrite the history, push it. If I break something, it's like, oh, okay, actually just get reset hard to whatever snapshot, do it again, right? And I found that that's a safe way to keep your sanity. So, but there's a
Yeah,
lot of other strategies as well. So
yeah, I think we're really in sync there. I did
yeah,
just that thing yesterday with my PR, so
nice.
that's a good way of working.
Cool. Uh, awesome. Well, I am heading out of town this weekend to go run a race, and I had to take Lona, who has sometimes made some appearances on the stream before, over to our neighbor's house. So I'm gonna have to wrap it up here. But do you have any fun weekend plans that you're looking forward to?
Not at the moment. We're actually looking to buy a puppy, but
Oh, all right.
we struck out on our first contact, so we'll go browsing for puppies. That's a decent weekend, I think.
Oh, absolutely. What breed are y'all looking at?
We think it's going to be a poodle. Actually, my
Okay.
girlfriend's allergic to a lot of animals, not dogs, but we'd prefer to try a breed that's less prone to cause allergies.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you like growing up or anything, did you have dogs?
No, we always had cats, and
Okay.
yeah, my girlfriend's allergic, so no
Yeah.
cats. But I think I've changed my mind. I'm now a dog person.
Okay. All right. Coming to the good side. Actually, I will say, so I had no pets growing up. My family was like, we're not, why are there animals in the house? We're not doing that. But my wife's family is like had dogs. They love their dogs, like big dog people. I feel like my personality is more aligned to cats, but we got a dog like right around when we got married. And she is like, I cannot tell you how spoiled she is. It is like an extreme degree. I was just so like we're gonna be gone for like 2 days, right? And she's gonna be literally next door to our house. And the amount of prep that I've done to like make sure she has everything she needs, she has like the right toys, right? Like her special like medications and stuff. And I'm like, how did I I went from like no pets to now I'm, dangerously close to treating this pet like a human. So but they do bring a lot of joy. So that's super exciting for y'all.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Trond, appreciate you joining. We're super excited to have you on the team if that wasn't already evident. And there's going to be some awesome new things that you're contributing to. They're going to be launched soon. So thanks to everyone who joined, and Trond and all viewers. Hope you all have a great weekend.
Have a nice weekend.